presentation we were requested to do at ISET last year. I don't know if any of you were at ISET last year. But based upon especially the experience that we have in Scholarleaders, having worked with now just over 40 institutions since about 2015 in what we call the Vital Sustainability Initiative, we recognize that there are a number of challenges that our schools face as far as sustainability is concerned. And that engagement, working with schools, have highlighted certain areas in which we've identified challenges, and one of that is in the area of executive leaders. And when we were busy preparing for that, we came up with a title that actually ACTI has adopted. All they did was they just swapped the title around. So I've swapped it around in the presentation as well, in the introduction. Leading a theological education institution, I was not trained for this. And so how are we going to facilitate a discussion that might be helpful in answering that gap that we know, that we've experienced? I experienced that for myself. Led a school for 14 years, but wasn't trained for it. Formally.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's true for the vast majority of schools that is out there and that we have encountered. And so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be sharing a few thoughts around that generally, and then I'm going to introduce to you specific areas that we have identified in terms of our experience and what we've seen in our research, are some of those very specific areas that the executive leaders of theological education schools tend to have challenges around. Okay, so we're going to highlight some of those things, we're going to make a few comments about that, but then we want to enter into a discussion, not just between ourselves, but involving you as well. So do you understand that? We don't want you to be the passive recipients of knowledge that we don't have. We want you to share your knowledge. One last thing I also need to say about that is because as a result of this, we're busy planning an article that we are wanting to publish on this that will be usable, for others in executive leadership. So I think the best thing to do is, first of all, just to quickly start with a basic definition. What is it that we mean when we are talking about executive leadership? And there's a general sense in which executive leadership is about the ability as the head of an institution to be able to organize or steward all the organizational resources to facilitate the mission of that school and its vision. So, being the executive leader of a school requires actually a list. It requires a number of different, what we might call multidisciplinary abilities to be able to be effective as a leader. And that often, and you'll pick this up in a lot of the leadership literature out there, and you would experience this, is in the area of strategic thinking, planning, implementing policies, programs, projects that ensure organizational success. Now, we use the word success very cautiously within our Christian background, because success, especially in the secular world, means everything has to be bigger, everything has to be better, etc. We tend to talk more about effectiveness. And so if we think about this in relation to theological education, I think you will agree with me that all of those things can actually and should actually apply to where we find ourselves. But in theological education, we're often dealing with very specific dynamics. And so there are a few characteristics in relation to that we think is very important to highlight and to kind of lay down as the foundation. One of that is that when we're talking about the leadership of a theological institution or leadership in theological education, we always want to start from a biblical basis. So we want to recognize that general definition doesn't necessarily always capture a lot of the biblical foundations and the theological foundations that actually drives us in our core function. And for us, it's all about this concept of servant leadership, that we are aware of, that is important for us. But it's got other dimensions, because we believe in stepping into this process is not something that often happens because we want it to happen. We don't often end up in positions of leadership within the church or in theological education because that is what we plan to do. I never planned to be the leader of a theological school. I planned to be a scribe that's going to be analyzing the differences between Dead Sea Scrolls. That is exactly what I want to do. Not to lead a theological institution.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it becomes a calling. So for us, the issue of calling is important. The theological and missiological aspects, that we don't exist for ourselves. We exist in relation to the Great Commission. We are seeking to serve the church. We are seeking to impact people. Our task is ultimately spiritual and it is moral. So that's a dimension that for us is very important in relation to theological education. Now we use different terms to describe what we have used as this general description of executive leadership. And sometimes we understand people think executive leadership, what is that all about? Well, it's the person who is essentially the head of the theological institution. And that can go by different titles. You'll either be called the president, you'll be called the rector, the principal, the vice chancellor, depending on the context within which you find yourself. Sometimes whatever educational philosophy or tradition has influenced you, also depending upon your context. But we're actually talking about all of those people and whatever other titles exist that we might not be aware of. But we do believe and we want to affirm that executive leadership involves organizational insights, culture creation, transmission and embedding. That theological education, executive leadership, as the leader you are there to guide strategy, to when there's no strategy present, to facilitate the process that will create that. That is part of what we do as we work with schools in the Vital Sustainability Initiative, and then to its implementation. And then executive leaders seek to balance, especially in theological education, the roles of the master teacher, as well as that of the exemplary spiritual leader, the effective pastor, and the insightful theologian. So there is this unique challenge that we face, that not just anybody could be an executive leader in a theological school or should be there because of all of these aspects. So now I want to pose a question. This is not a rhetorical question, but this is to facilitate some kind of responses already. Why does executive leadership matter in theological education? In the light of what I've shared, as well as what you believe and what you have experienced. So, without sharing long testimonies, some thoughts. Why is this thing important? Yes.
Yeah, I think that every institution has a mission, and somebody needs to own that mission and drive it.
Yeah.
And that is why executive leadership is important. It's not just owning and driving it, but making sure that you go along with all those who matter in achieving the mission of the school.
So the idea of a champion. Others, why is executive leadership in theological education important?
Someone that should be the face or be held accountable for achieving the goal of the institution.
Yeah. That is a very important thing. In fact, as you shared that, I'm reminded of an interesting response that I got when we did something like this at ISET, but maybe I'll share that later. Yes, sir.
Someone must drive the vehicle.
Somebody must drive the vehicle.
Vehicle remains stationary.
Yes. Yeah. So it's tied into you, sir.
Yeah.
This out.
Direct the organization to achieve the ultimate mission, the goal of the church, and the purpose for the establishment of the institution.
Yeah. Yes, it's gone.
Yeah, to create culture according to the values of the institution.
Yeah. So I think it all boils down to this idea of the importance of leadership. We see that throughout Scripture. You know, that you know, there was always a person that no matter what God was busy doing, when it came to leading God's people, taking God's people from one place to another, God always raised a leader. You know, whether it was a Moses or a Deborah or a Joshua, you know, leadership is very important. Now, as I said, you know, I had this very interesting idea when I asked this question, and I said, you know, because it was an international gathering, and so it wasn't just Africans, it was people from all the continents, you know. And there was a group of people who came to me afterwards from Germany, and they says, why is it that we're always talking about leadership as being invested in a single person? You know, why can't it be a group? You know, and we had an interesting discussion around that. You know, and I think to take the image that I think I've heard, you know, I mean, in a vehicle, you only have one steering wheel, don't you? And I asked him, you know, so practically how does it work, you know? And they shared testimonies about how having a group of people who fulfills the executive leadership function works. You know, I said, that's great, you know, but I'm sure there's instances at the end of the day, you don't want to become a multi-headed monster, Hydra, you know. At the end of the day, you need maybe this single figure. Okay, so thank you for that. But we have to recognize that leadership is not an easy task. We often describe it as a lonely journey. And when we take a look at and we reflect on the experiences of many different leaders in theological education, especially within the majority world, we recognize that there are some unique challenges that we face. Let me just quickly share one of that with you. One of it is institutional fragility. We often step into institutions in which it feels like we are living on the edge. You know, in fact, the previous president, even of our ministry, which is a faith-based ministry, would say to us, you know, we are often as non-profit organizations, faith-based organizations, you know, we are 1 or 2 months away from bankruptcy. That's the way he used to express that. Yes. Because we live in this very fragile institutional environment. Sometimes we are in situations, and now this is true for some of you, knowing your context, contextual hostility. You know, in which there are just elements, not just even within the church, but within the community, that's just working against you. So whether there are criminal elements or whether there are political elements, you know, we live within that environment, and that adds a very unique dimension often and challenge to our leadership. Then there are economic realities and stress. I mean, because at the end of the day, the buck stops with you. You know? So you have to make sure that the salaries get paid and the utilities get paid, and that you meet your budget. And to demonstrate leadership in that becomes very challenging. And then there's also the issue of mission alignment and priorities. You know, because you are there to lead the school, but you know, you have stakeholders, you have partners, either denominationally, you know, either much broader than that. And you have a specific belief, you know, as to where it is you believe the Lord is wanting you to lead the school. But, you know, that often clashes with other people's ideas. So we need to recognize that, you know, and that also adds another dimension to what we are doing. So before I come and I share some of the areas that we need to take cognizance of, based on our title, and this is what helped us to formulate this title. We recognize that there are gaps in executive leadership in theological education. The first one is precisely that which comes from our title, that often we are stepping into the position of theological leadership without having gone through any formal preparation for executive leaders. Now, some of you might have been privileged in doing that. And you might come from a business background, right? You might have been a leader already. And that, in a certain sense, gives you preparation for doing what you're doing. But I don't know anybody here who has done a degree or has gone through a formal process of training that at the end of that they say, okay, now you have been trained to become the leader of this institution. So there's a lack of that. And sometimes there's also inadequate coaching to enhance your organizational skills. You know the expression, being thrown in at the deep end, right? So you want to learn how to swim in this giant pool of the responsibilities of executive leadership, and often what happens is you just get thrown in the deep end. Sometimes you've had very little opportunity to prepare for that because it happens suddenly. And even if there is, some kind of preparation period, because of what happens often in schools, the way in which it's structured, sometimes there's denominational and church involvement in that. There's often this process. But you end up in that position, and then once you're in the position, then you only know what it's all about. Right? It's easy to be a spectator, watching a boxing match and saying this is what they need to do. But once you're inside that ring, that's a completely different story. And so who's going to lead us, who's going to coach us? But then sometimes we are also guilty in that we are very slow in the pace of our learning and how we posture ourselves. And so we sometimes resist advice. Sometimes we resist feedback, that people's giving to us, because I'm the leader. I believe I'm the leader and that's what I need to do. And then finally, inadequate continuing education to improve our performance. I remember when I stepped into different positions at the seminary, from being the registrar, the academic, then even the president, I even said to the board, please, can't I go and do some qualification? Because in our local university I had a very nice school of governance, and I was looking at the programs and I thought this stuff I could learn. I then discovered that ATS in the United States, ran workshops for people in those positions, and I thought, wow, is there anybody on the continent of Africa? And I looked around and I couldn't find anything. And at the end of the day, I just had to basically learn on the job, as it were. But to open myself up for the opportunities for learning. So how are we going to bridge this gap? How are we going to address these challenges? And so what we are wanting to share with you is that in order to help ourselves to become better leaders, more effective leaders in theological education, we need to be able to pay attention to key issues in various areas. And I've listed over here 7. And these 7 areas are areas that we haven't sucked out of our thumbs. But it's areas that we've identified in terms of our engagement with leaders of theological education in the majority world and what we've experienced ourselves. So that we want to share in the discussion, but also in sharing some of the ideas, that there are these areas in which we need to pay attention as key areas of our responsibility. My brother Taiwo over here is going to address the first one in terms of visionary leader. I'm going to take a look at the next 3: personnel motivator, financial manager, frontline enabler. He's got vast experience in terms of boards, so he'll take a look at that. The last 2, of spiritual nurture and theological leader, I somehow sense that is something that, given the context in which we find ourselves, we tend to know a lot about. So if we don't get to those, that might not be that important. Maybe it's the first 5 that is important. So we want to talk about that. So Taiwo, would you like to talk a little bit about visionary leader? And once he has shared some of his ideas, as I said, we want to facilitate the discussion with you around that. What's your impression about that? What's your experience around that? Some of your challenges, etc.
Thank you, Brother Linzay. Well, I think none of us have been prepared for what we are doing in life. I was sharing on the table this afternoon that when you get your first degree, I don't know by scientific evidence, because that's what we deal with, right? How many do we think that end up doing what they did in their first degree for the rest of their life?
No.
Sorry.
It's rare.
Rare.
In fact, many of us, what we are doing today was not our first degree, even second. And that's why you see people repeating and going back. And some people never graduate from university or colleges anyway. So when you talk about visionary leader, I want to get just to learn from you as well. What does that mean? Anyone want to speak to that? What is the characteristic of a visionary leader?
I think it's the ability to see the potential of an organization to grow, to get to a place beyond where they are right now.
Ability to see. Okay. Good. I like that. Any? Yes.
Well, this ability to perceive a possible future of the system and prepare for it.
Ability to see the possible. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would add by saying the ability to see and don't allow yourself to be distracted as you reach towards the goal. Because distraction will come.
Okay. I have two. I'm still coming back with other questions. So please, I will come to you because ladies first, right?
Always.
In fact, how many ladies do we have here? So I said, then we can name her Iron Lady. I'm intimidated by anything. Please go for it.
A visionary leader is someone who has a mental portrait or have a dream of a bigger picture of what is leading us.
Okay, now I will allow you then, please.
In being able to see the future, you must be ready with the capacity to drive what it takes to arrive in that future.
Okay, lastly?
So it's the ability to see a better tomorrow.
Better tomorrow. So we are all talking about ability. And quickly, I will share some
About the ability to see the risks as well.
the risk.
Yeah.
Yes, pros and the cons.
Yes.
And yeah, okay. No, thank you for that. Quickly, we visionary leaders will run through that quickly with us here. Is becoming an executive leader requires a mind shift change. So when we talk about ability to see, you think differently, act differently. Okay, so you become an agent of change. Okay. 2, executive leader is a custodian and motivator of leading vision. So here something is happening here that you are changing the norm. And that's one of the easy tasks to do. Some of us, we don't want to rock the boat. So when we come in as an executive leader of a Bible school, there's this that simply we forget. And that's why sometimes when people are aspiring for a place of leadership, it scares me to death. Because if we know what it involves, in fact, some of us will just walk away. That's a joke. This is a joke. George Bush of America was passing by at the beautiful resort, and God said, Bush, and he ignored God. And somebody said to him, Bush, what is your problem? God is calling you. Even bother to say, yes, sir. He said, the last time I listened to him in the wilderness, I know what become of him. Yeah, so if some of us know what it takes, because we are leading vision, and a vision is bigger than me and you. Okay, the executive leader is a custodian and motivator of mission charter. Oh, it's a whole lot of issue. Because this, you have all kind of issues as an executive leader that you have to deal with. But many of us don't ask ourselves those critical questions. Number 1, do I have the competency? Because we need to be honest to ourselves. But we aspire, even we use different means to get there. But we may not have the competency. But the next question is, do I have the passion for this? Because if these two are not connected, oh, it's going to be a long walk. We have a book written by Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom. So, and quickly, because also I want to share a quick thought around this. Number 4 is the executive leader conduct operational management without micromanage. This is my definition of leadership. This is scary. Somebody told me last time, he said, TK, you're so bold to express your own definition. I said, yes. My definition of leadership is this. Leadership is all about managing people and people-related issues. And when I use the word manage, it's not micromanage. Because as a leader, you don't lead animals, you don't lead house, you don't lead non-living things, you are leading human beings. And I believe that a leader should be competent enough to be able to relate with people of all levels. Those who are up there, middle, and the low level. Because these are the people you lead. When a leader says, well, I don't have, no, I operate at this level, that person is not a leader. Number 2, people-related issues. These people have issues in their life. So it's not enough just to look at the individual just by face. Leader require ability to see beyond what you can see physically. Inside the heart and the mind of the people you are leading. So that is where, now, micromanage, Linzay said, I am the boss, you listen to me. There's a saying that a young man, the father said, kneel down there. And he kneeled down, and he said, are you kneeling down? He said, no, I'm standing. Although I'm kneeling down, I'm standing. Inside. Inside of me, I am standing. And that is the attitude of people we work with sometimes. Not that they are listening to us, but they have to just because you are the boss. Then, but also when it comes to a place of leadership, that is where gross mismanagement happens. We fail to understand that these people around us, they are gift and talent. And that no person knows it all. I need these people. Because the truth of life is this. What is missing in me is in him. And what is missing in him possibly is in me. The executive leader drive institution culture. So we're talking about, I think you talk extensively on that. Let me talk about 5 ingredients of a visionary leader. Number 1, inspiration. And this inspiration must come from within and out of your personal relationship with God. He is the only one that can inspire us to do what we cannot naturally do. And that inspiration needs to combine with aspiration. It's one thing to be inspired.
You have it.
Sorry?
Okay. I thought you have it up there.
Oh, no,
it's coming out.
It's one thing to be inspired by divine authority, by divine grace within you.
Right.
It's another thing to be inspired. When these two merge together, that is where a vision becomes. Ability to vision for a different, for a new thing to become the agent of change. That is intra-feeling, intra issues that you deal with. And that's why I call a visionary person is like a mad person, because he sees what other cannot see. And you can only see that by internal inspiration, which you receive by divine providence. And that now moves you to become inspired, to be motivated. That even when people are saying it cannot be, but you already see possibility.
Yeah.
And now sharing it and working on it in your heart and envisioning it out to carry it out. There's 2 other things that can make it now real. Is to plan it. And that's when you're jotting it down. Some people, they talk on, we will. Then the last one, is to create it. And that is when the word of Miles Morris that said the richest place in the world is not America, nor Europe. In fact, we passed through the richest place as we were coming here. Where is the richest place in the world? Where ideas remain unfulfilled. Goal, ambition, never fulfilled.
Thank you, Daniel. Any thoughts? Anybody would like to share, or any personal experiences that you've had? How this has helped you? Yes.
One thing we should be clarified, a leader is a person who sees that others do not see. Others may see. Sometimes there will be convergence when you bring them together and share your vision. They will, I saw this.
And I think that is what the next one that she's talking about,
Okay.
we're talking about comes now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Over here.
Yeah, the issue of maybe in our organization, I'm thinking I'm in the wrong. That's what I want to. A church, they are converted training for. The question is it really possible for everybody for you to lead people? You don't see one of them who is standing at the city for one reason or the other. And then organize, maybe the other one is ambitious. He doesn't just want to follow. He's thinking he will be the next leader. He wouldn't want to give it all so that when he gets there. So is it possible for you to lead a team, a group of people? You won't see one that is standing, one already is sitting. Is it possible?
Yes. You see, as a leader, we should not be intimidated or being challenged by people that didn't see things alongside the same way. In fact, they are good for us to become check and balance.
So that they will be there.
They will be there.
That's all I
They will be there. We will have it. In fact, and that's why there's somebody wrote, he's not a theologian, so I think he's one of our West Africa brother. And I look forward for the day that I will meet with him. He wrote many books, and many people are buying it, but it's full of heresy. He said that as a leader, music greet me, and I passed through music, and music did not greet me. It's a sign of rebellion. That is a cultural. He wrote his book based on cultural practices of
operations.
Yeah, so I think we need that. In fact, we need those people in our around.
Well, it's closely related to that. When we talk about leaders just seeing things, seeing the future, I think one of the key things coming from what my brothers and my seniors are alluding to is oftentimes we miss also the opportunity to see the potential people who will take after us. As I look into this room now, there's nobody who is younger than 29 years. No. Does that mean that we don't have those theologians? As to the vision, yes. Now, if we keep coming here, all of us all the time, without bringing those ones that we have a vision that will take after us, we'll keep it in the same cycle, and that's why we say we're not prepared. So I think for us, part of seeing the visionary leader is also seeing the potential in people. Don't see the young people as threats, but see them as potential, begin to raise them, journey alongside with them. If each one of us have brought a younger person to this place to learn this, then we are preparing them, we won't repeat the same mistake. Thank you, sir.
That's the issue of succession,
That's
what we call it. Working ourselves out of a job, recognizing that, we shouldn't always and cannot always hold that position ourselves. Yes, sir. And then,
just in agreement to what he said a visionary leader is like a madman. A madman doing what others cannot even understand. I used to have a leader who would always say, in a vehicle, the more where you go, you have a driver and you have the apprentice. And he will always see the apprentice who hardly see what the driver sees. Even though at times he wants to control the driver knows where he's going. And so the leader will always say to me before I left, what I'm seeing as a driver, you will not see as an apprentice until you get into the seat, then you see.
One of the key issues I can see the fact that we're talking about vision and what needs to be done. I also believe that oftentimes we as leaders would claim we have the vision, but we often fail in mobilizing those around us to achieve that vision. The fact that you may have a vision does not necessarily that you'll achieve it. It requires other competencies for that vision to be achieved. And it's something that teamwork, it's very key. And how to motivate those around you towards a specific goal. To me, those are fundamental.
Because leadership assumes that there are people leading you. Because if you are the leader and there's nobody leading you, somebody said you're just taking a nice stroll in the park. So we need to recognize that as a leader, one of our key responsibilities is that we are leading people, we are working with people. We are leading faculty and we are leading staff. And so it is always going to be important for us as leaders, while we are seeking to be visionary and inspirational, and the qualities that my brother Taiwo spoke about, it is important for us to have a good understanding and to build relationships with the people that forms part of our broader team. So whether it's on senior leadership of the school, it's very important that you have good, healthy relationships there, and then to those who are there to help you to fulfill the overall mission of the school. Your faculty as your teaching, and then your administration as your support staff. And as the executive leader, we sometimes use the word boss, but you are their leader. They are looking up to you, and it's important that you build relationships with them in a way in which you are building them up. Some of them might become the next leader of the school, unintentionally, intentionally, but it's important that we become effective in that. Now, one of the ways in which we become effective in that, and that is our responsibility as the executive leader, is knowing the needs of the institution, because that ultimately determines your personnel. Now, I know that when we step into that position, there's often people there already. Okay? And so it's important that we learn what are the abilities and the capabilities of those people, and do we have the right people in the right positions. Because sometimes we might place somebody as the dean of students, but they are actually a rotten pastor. So it is important that we understand in terms of the relational and human dynamics as to what happens around us. What is the needs of our institution and what's the right people to put in that. So that when a vacancy does arise, we become very intentional and taking up our responsibility of finding the right person for the right job. Why? Because this is an important principle. Personnel capacity will ultimately drive our productivity. Not productivity in terms of the way the world see it, but we have got a specific goal and a specific function. And sometimes as a leader I have to deal with that, complaints that comes from our student colleagues, because maybe the registrar or the bookkeeper or the bursar, in terms of their interactions, it hasn't gone that well. I often used to remind my staff and say to them, be careful, because one day this person that's now a student might become your pastor. And that happened. That happened. So it's about building that relationship with them. And so how do we go about building that capacity within them, And sometimes we will find ourselves in that position where we have to make the hard decisions. In that when we discover that people are the wrong people for the job, we need to sometimes move them on or move them out or move them elsewhere. Now that becomes very easy when you're dealing with failure in moral issues. I've had to deal with that in some of the staff. Then you have to go through that process of firing a person because they have become guilty of behavior that is completely out of keep with where we stand. But sometimes you deal with people that are just, something happens in them that changes. You know, they used to be very good at what they do, but then their productivity and your expectations of them drops, and they no longer meet that, and then you have to deal with that. And sometimes it has meant upskilling people, allowing them to be trained. Sometimes it's recognizing that they might be better in another position, but sometimes it also results in which you have to say, this is your first warning, this is your second warning, and then you have to make the hard decisions in that regard. In which, when that has happened, I've never done that on my own. I've always gone to my board, because they protect you in that. Personnel retention reinforces institutional culture. Remember at the beginning we said, that as an executive leader, you're responsible for facilitating the institutional culture. And having staff that is getting along with each other, there's no backbiting, there's no infighting, etc., helps to build the culture. I've been amazed, going to some schools, it's not just schools that I've been working with in VSI, but in other contexts as well. And sometimes you come and you look at, wow, what a place. But as you get to chat to people and talk to people, you realize that sometimes there are personality issues and personality clashes going on. And the minute your student colleagues pick that up, it can be a huge knock against building institutional culture. I mean, I know a Bible school where that has happened. And as a result, direct result of that, the registrations of their students dropped significantly. Just because the students knew that there was stuff happening, between the staff. And then finally, managing successful transition. This is what we spoke about. And succession planning safeguards the organizational achievements and accomplishments. It takes a lot to invest in people who fulfills a particular role and responsibility at the school. Right from yourself as the executive leader, as well as people who hold key positions, especially on your administration, whether they're academic deans, whether there are people in finances. Often getting good quality people is very difficult. So sometimes they learn by experience, sometimes we invest in them. But we also need to think about who might need to replace them. I always had on my calendar when faculty members were going to be retiring. Right. You have to keep track of that, because you don't want to be surprised. In terms of the natural cycle of things when retirement comes up, but sometimes the surprises do hit you. I remember faculty members sitting down and saying, I believe the Lord is calling me too. And I'm like, wow. But if it is indeed the Lord that is leading them somewhere else, then I wouldn't stop them. But we always have to be thinking about, what if so-and-so resigns, where we're going to find that next person. And so as a leader, we need to be thinking about that. Who could possibly do that job? I mean, we even had a list of potential future lecturers from our students coming through our ranks, and then we said, okay, so we would have a process of after they've graduated and gone into pastoral ministry, because that was one of the criteria. You cannot come and teach at the seminary if you've not had some level of pastoral experience, depending on what you teach. I mean, we didn't require our psychology lecturers, to be pastors, for example. But that is what we always need to think about. So those are some ideas. I don't know if there are any questions you might have, or any particular experiences or testimonies you'd like to share in that regard. Yes.
Thank you. I would like to know, when you are a young leader in an institute, a theological institute, you are leading people that are more old than you. And you may give something to do or a program, and some may not obey you. So what to do in that case? I remember I had a time of prayer with my students, and I gave a program. So there was one of the students, instead of coming and leading the service, he went to the field. So, how to manage this kind of issue?
So the Apostle Paul says to Timothy, Don't let anybody look down on you because you're young, but you set the example. You know, I think it's about that Christ-likeness that is required of us in terms of how we deal with that. I mean, I've had personal experience of that. When I became the president of the seminary, I was 36 years old. The youngest ever person to be put in that position, in which every single faculty member, the vast majority of the staff were older than me. Yeah. And so I was like, wow, you know, this is amazing. But you know, you have to show people respect, and you also have to learn how to balance the respect with boldness. You know, without losing their respect. So I think it's about being willing, you know, in humility, but with firmness, you know, to be able to exercise your leadership.
I think you mentioned earlier on as one of the expectations of a leader that you need to pastor. You pastor everybody. You pastor even those people who are older than you. How do you pastor them? In themselves, they see you as a young person who does not have experience, but you know that you have been given that responsibility to pastor that person, even though they may not give you that respect or that position, but you know. And therefore, it's the sense of everybody kept on saying ability, capacity. That is what will enable you even to accommodate such kind of people, because they may have problems in themselves, not because of you. But if you are somebody who is always thinking that people hate me or it's about me, you personalize the issues. You won't be able to deal with it. You must be able to separate yourself from the responsibility that you have. Let me give you an example. One of my colleagues is here. I went away and there was a problem at the college. They said they didn't want me anymore. I came back, I was told by the board, I said to them, it's okay, give me 2 days. I'll go back to the institution, I'll talk to them. So I went back to the institution, I humbled myself, I accepted where I made mistakes, and I also told them other responsibilities that they may have not been appreciative of, but they were not from me, they were from the board. I was simply forcing or enforcing the board's expectations. So they couldn't blame me for it, because it wasn't me. So the fact that probably I accepted certain faults in me about certain situations, in this particular case, it was lack of communication. After 2 days, I went back to the board. I said, my faculty and staff said they would like to see if they can work it out. We can work it out together. Let's find each other in the process. There's a sense in which, like he says, Christ-like. Even if you are blamed, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with being blamed. Sometimes you need somebody has got to take the responsibility and accept the fault in order to move things forward. And that is the capacity. When we talk about leadership capacity, the buck stops with you, whether it's good or whether it's bad. It's your responsibility.
Yeah, even Jesus had a Judas.
Maybe I should also add that that situation might occur because of a knowledge gap.
Yeah,
exactly. You find that unlike secular organizations, where people seem to be familiar with the way organizations are done, you find that in religious organizations, they don't understand.
Yeah.
And that might be the reason they're behaving the way they are behaving. So it's part of the responsibility of the leader to create an environment where they can get to know how organizations should function.
I've realized that in the presentations, the last statement you made while explaining the last point, wanted that you should assert your leadership I was expecting you saying we should exercise your authority. Is the word authority an anathema when it comes to leadership?
I would say, based upon the way in which Jesus himself described it, you know, in Mark chapter 10, remember when James and John, the sons of thunder, Lord, I will sit at your right hand, let me sit at your left hand. You know, Jesus said, amongst the leaders out there, what do? They exercise the authority over you, but not so with you. And so Jesus says there and speaks about this idea that to be great in the kingdom of God, you have to be the least, you have to be the servant, even the slave, the doulos of Paul. So the idea of authority, in which the worldly idea of authority is not what we affirm. You know, it is how Jesus exercised a spiritual authority, you know, which only he could have. But Jesus said to us, when you lead, you be the servant. Yeah. Not the doormat.
Exactly.
Not the doormat. It's the difference between the doormat and being a servant. It's the attitude. You know, Philippians 2 talks about that example. So we avoid the word authority.
Just to build on what you said, I'm of opinion that leaders have two faces. Lion face and sheep. And when you look at these two animals, Jesus identified with it. He said, I am the Lion of Judah, but at the same time, I'm the Lamb.
The Lamb of God.
So there's a place whereby a leader needs to be firm.
Yeah.
Yes.
When it comes to some fundamental issues that is not negotiable, it shouldn't. And at that point, you call him. But at the same time, let's look at Jesus. He never spared the teachers of the law of his time.
That's right.
He was he go for it. But here's a woman caught in his arms.
Yeah.
They say, I have nothing against you. So it depends on, some people say Jesus practiced servant leadership. In fact, I don't believe in those jargon. Jesus didn't practice servant leadership, rather situational leadership. Every situation will give you of what to do.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Yes, the last point is very important.
Yeah.
But I think in some cases, the bodies that take care of leadership, succession, keep you who is actually preparing people for that. You are not present. And if you are not, if God doesn't have, even when you recommend, you will go and drop those people that you have already prepared, that can take the vision and continue. And the institutions have experienced discontinuity because someone came and saw that those who were there did nothing and started something else. And that discontinuity always takes the institution back many years. And that is where my challenge is.
And I think if we find ourselves in that situation, we need to recognize that that's the hand that we've been dealt. And so how do we respond to that? You know, I mean, we can throw up our hands in frustration, or we can say, let's see what I can do as a leader to develop this person into this position, you know, and coach them. You know, you might have other people on the team, and they're doing well. You affirm them, you empower them, you go for it, you don't micromanage them. But you identify those people and you say, you know, I've got a challenge, I've got a problem. How can I work with these people? So I spoke about that Jesus had a Judas, but Jesus had other 11 disciples, and I remember hearing a sermon many years ago that says, the 12 most unlikely people that Jesus could have chosen to be his disciples. Matthew, a tax collector, Simon, a zealot. Sworn enemies. But what did he do? He somehow had the skill of, in that years that he spent with him, you know, to get them around the same vision. You know, Judas, you know, was it the elect or was he just a failure? You know, we can have a theological debate around that. But that's the reality. But there are the others, the other 11 that became the apostles, you know, and who became the leaders of the church. So, we have to be willing sometimes as a leader We're not always going to have everything our own way, but how do we play that hand that we are dealt with? Sorry that I use a very secular metaphor there. A financial manager. We're not saying that you have to run the finances, but the executive leader has got a very important and a critical role to play in the overall financial management of the school. Now, I know the vast majority of us, including myself, I just had accounting in high school to help me with financial issues. But the minute I stepped into the position, in fact, it started with me as the registrar. Because being the registrar meant I had to work with certain financial aspects. I went to our treasurer and I said, please help me, teach me, train me. I want to understand some of the bigger assets as to the finances of the school. By the time I became the president, I understood a lot. I could answer a lot of questions regarding the finances of the school. So the ability to understand and interpret financial records drives good financial decision making. As the leader, and you are the one responsible for vision, and there are things you're wanting to implement, you need to have an understanding as to, do I have the resources, especially the financial resources, to help me to be able to accomplish that. Now, if you don't know that, you don't know what your budget is and what your budget allows and what your budget constraints are, and the checks and the balances that are in place, you could find yourself in deep trouble financially. Because I know that for us in theological education, the issue of financial sustainability is a big issue. We often are living from hand to mouth. I know exactly what that means. So how do we make those decisions? We need to have that information, and we must be able to, when we take a look at the financial information in the way in which it's presented to us, in those spreadsheets or whatever mechanisms we use, we must be able to have an overall understanding as to how to interpret that. And if we don't know, somebody is always going to be there to help us to be able to do that. Why? Because we need to make decisions based upon what is available. Understanding the economics of theological education and its implication for mission. So I shared in our presentation the other day that overall picture. That in theological education, by and large, 99% of the time, we are subsidizing our students. And we need to understand that, not only on our income side, but the impact on the expenditure side. Because often we say, we balance the books, we balance the budget, but at whose cost? And often it comes at the cost of your faculty and your staff, because the salaries that we are paying them is not necessarily a reasonable or a livable salary. So we balance the budget, but somebody has actually paid the cost of that. So we need to be aware of that as to how that impacts our situation so that we're able to address that. Long-term financial planning ensures effective budgeting and financial prudence. I know that we often say in Africa, because we live from hand to mouth, we can't budget for next year or the year after that. But it's important for us to do that, because we are able through that to pick up certain trends. If it's not been part of our culture, we can make it part of our culture. Financial insight and guidance are crucial for facilities development and maintenance. I think I hinted at this in the presentation of the other day, that when we take a look at where we spend our money in theological education, we tend to spend 60% of our finances on our personnel, our faculty and our staff, which means that we've got about 40% of our finances left to be able to address issues in terms of our ongoing operations. And there are some things that are just huge black holes often, as far as seminary finance is concerned. And one of the biggest ones is deferred maintenance. That we often have facilities that, we've got a budget for finances, but the budget is inadequate to actually meet the needs. And so what do? We defer the maintenance. We say, oh, we're going to do it next year when the thing breaks down. But the problem of that is, the minute we deferred maintenance, we actually are increasing the cost. You know, because it might be expensive now, but given the way the economy is, it becomes more expensive next year or the year after that. And so that becomes a problem. You know, so how do we address that? You know, one of these next door to salaries, the one other big expense that we should be spending our money, and that is in terms of the maintenance of our campus. And as I shared, typically we discover that only 5% of income is actually spent on maintenance, which is very, very, very inadequate. Okay, so those are just some of the key issues, the broad areas in terms of finances and what we think is required. Any questions, any comments,
Linzay,
wisdom you'd like to share?
what is the import of this figure, this picture? Because it's frightening.
It's
Because we are here. This is the executive leader carrying the financial burden, the dollar sign. In fact, they will tell you that if it's one stroke, it's actually pesos, but if it's two, it's dollars. So that's what. Yeah. No, I don't know about you, but my prayer life increased. Because there were times, it's like, where's this money going to come from?
Right.
Especially when those unexpected things happen. Especially in maintenance. And I remember that one year we had a major problem with our sewage line. And we had been paying plumbers to sort out, and all of a sudden, the problem comes, and we get in professionals, and they say, "This is what's going to cost you." We didn't budget for that. So what are we going to do? And then you pray, Lord, Brother Cletus.
I want to know your opinion. As a Christian leader, you have a group of people you are leading in a seminary or school. Which should be your number one priority? The people or the project? Which of them will you sacrifice for the other on some occasions?
I have an answer. Anybody else would like to? What takes priority, people or projects?
I feel there may not be a kind of straight-jacketed answer, because there are occasions that if you want to leave out project, you may never come back to achieve the vision of the institution. In such a case, you can even plead with the people, because people will hear and understand better than project itself. Project may not want to understand you, but you can say, please, we will defer this because of this. Then you come back to still pay them. But if you leave the project at that point in time, it is gone forever. So we consider which one can stay a little longer. Then you decide where to.
So it might not be either or.
No, I'm not talking about particular situations.
Okay.
I'm talking from the world group. You will see maybe a leader. All he wants is to put up projects. He doesn't care what happened to the people. So I'm not talking about particular situation. I'm talking about from the world group.
From a planning perspective.
I think you should be ready to carry the personnel. It should come first in the caregivers, because when they are demotivated, they're in trouble. That's the word, demotivation. Especially in our economies. The economies are very bad. Salaries are pittance you give. And so, but if they are motivated to know that at the end of the month, the little comes in, and they see that you are sincere, when you get to projects, they will follow you on that.
So I think maintaining a transparency, communicating to people, because often there's this impression. I remember we were working with one school, and the faculty was saying, they're spending money on this, and they're spending money on that. They see things, they see the project, and say, but here we are struggling. However, that project come about as a result of what we call designated giving.
Yeah.
You know, there's a donor out there, maybe without even being asked, they come along and they say, we want to give you money to do that project.
Yeah.
You know? Then, I mean, if it's a worthwhile project and you need it and you want it, go for it.
Yeah.
You know. But then it's important that one communicates that with everybody involved. You know, so that they don't feel that you have implemented the project at their expense. Yeah, so I think it's that balance. Was there another hand?
Yes, I wanted to add that it will depend on what sacrificing the people means. Okay, like we have all noted, mainly in our theological schools across Africa, the quality of remuneration is not high, but that's what is approved.
Yeah.
Now, if sacrificing the people means not increasing the salary, but being able to pay them what they are supposed to be paid, so that you can do other things, well, maybe that we can say we can handle that. But if sacrificing the people means not even paying them that little,
that's the problem.
then it will be
I agree. Yeah. So we're not in this ministry because we want to make money, and we know that in all likelihood, most of us are going to remain in this ministry at the sacrifice. You know? But there's always going to be a line. Because we have families, we've got other responsibilities, etc. You know, so we need to be sensitive to that. But I think we need to recognize that we're never going to be paid or remunerated in terms of CEOs out there and etc.
Yeah, I think the other thing is when we understand the economics of theological education. It's I don't know to what extent that works. We tried that, establishing and encouraging volunteerism. We have many students with several professional backgrounds, like electricians, ICT operators. And sometimes, you know, we encourage students because at the end of the day, if it is our major for the service giving. So if we inculcate that value in our students, and you may find some students who voluntarily cover, you know, the area that could cost you a lot.
Yes. Yes.
So I don't know.
No, I think so. So I think the principle that you're talking about there is recognizing that we often have access to resources that will help us to mitigate against spending money that we can't afford to spend, but in a more creative way. Now, there are creative ways of being able to sometimes covering our costs without cooking the books, or without doing unnecessary gymnastics in our books. You know, we find creative ways of being able to resolve our problems. Because a lot of our students, they come with skills. They are professionals. I can tell you the same thing happened in our seminary. We had electricians, we had plumbers, you know, and we would sometimes negotiate with them and say, you know, we've got this particular thing that needs to be fixed. We know how much it's going to cost us. You know, what are you willing to do to help us? What discount can we give you on your fees that we can negotiate? You know, we would find creative ways of being able to do that. You know, to be able to accomplish that task. And that's the reason why, this is the next session before I give over to my brother. You know, he's suffering from a burden, but we need to move up. And the only way we can move up sometimes is we need to recognize. This is the one that probably strikes the fear in God in most of us. And I know that when I was approached by the board to become the principal of the school, the thing that worried me the most was fundraising. Because I understood the financial situation of our seminary, the way in which we were structured, you know, and that there's going to be this responsibility because my predecessor found himself in that position. You know, he came into the situation where there was significant denominational subvention and subsidy that was given to the seminary, and overnight, due to things that were happening in the denomination, that gets taken away. So how were we going to be filling that gap? He had to become a frontline fundraiser, you know. And we need to recognize that just given the realities that we face, for most of us in theological education within the majority world, we have to be part of that process. Now, we don't have to do everything, but we have got an important role, I believe, to play in the goals of fundraising for the seminary. So the executive leader should overcome the fear for fundraising. That's the first thing. And so I prayed the prayer of Solomon. God grant me the wisdom. Nothing magical happened. Nothing magical happened. But we identified somebody that was a professional fundraiser, a Christian one at that. We were able to employ the person part-time, and I said to this person, teach me. Teach me. You know, because I need to understand what my role is, what role can I play. And I had to overcome that fear. The executive leader is the chief fundraiser of the seminary, of the institution. In what way? Sometimes you're going to have to just take the responsibility of going to ask people. Because if you're not going to do it, nobody else is going to do it. And before you know it, the school is going to have to close down. You know, you read Christianity today, you think we struggle. Everybody struggles in theological education. I've been reading articles after articles of schools, well, our time is almost up, of people, of schools that have closed down. So the executive leader is the chief fundraiser of the institution. Good fundraising infrastructure determines revenue outcomes. The executive leader is the custodian of institutional partnerships. You've got friends. You know, some missionaries, some past lecturers, people who've gone elsewhere, alumni, etc. You know, those are the people that you have access to that will help you in your fundraising. I think I need to stop there. I can't take any questions. I want Taiwo to talk about what is very important, and that is our relationship with the board, and then we will close down, unfortunately. Out of time. Surprised.
As an African, or not only even is an African word, where fish is rotting, where does it start from?
From the head. The head.
So I ask a question. How is your body doing? How did somebody wants to just how's your body? Great? Excellent? Okay. Sorry? Okay. Okay. That's a political motivated answer. Okay. Well, I would say this board is very critical, even in the issue we just mentioned in the area of fundraising. Sometimes we, executive leader, we take too much upon ourselves. And also this is coming from African idea of a leader. A leader doesn't ask for help. You got all answers. But that's not true. Asking for help is a sign of weakness. Not, we don't see it as a strength. So our board is very critical and can take you the whole night. And thank God nobody's sitting on the window. So we have been told that our time is up. Quickly, I will run us through this and share quick thoughts as well. Executive leader manage the board in humility. One is the fact that many of us think that we are the one adding value to the board. We think by I invite you to be my board, I'm giving you a place of honor and a privilege, and you need to respect me for that. That's not true. In fact, board is the one adding value to you. you are the one encroaching into their privacy, time, and resources.
And expertise.
Expertise. So, when I hear people say, I'm sitting on the board, that shocked me. It's a wrong word. And that's why the organization is suffering, because you sit on the neck of the organization. Or rather, I'm serving on the board. It's a place of service. And they need to know that. Once they know that, they change the board. So, in humility, you are the one to manage the board. And you need them more than they need you. If we see that as a critical element in our organization, then we handle them with care. Many times, the CEO or the executive leader is the root cause of many problems, because we misrepresent the board, even among the management. And I've heard many people say, don't worry, as a board member, when we get to the meeting, we will sort him out. That talks about commotion, war going on in that board. Then the second one, so it is your job as executive leader to manage the board, just like any other team that you want to manage. Number two, executive leader is a facilitator of board function and create a conducive decision-making environment. Three is lack of orientation. 85% of board on the continent of Africa has not have a standard training that requires of a board. Yes, sometimes we say we have a board. When I look at the material, it's just organization policy. And the last one is inability of the board to set a goal. The goal is not to be a contrary to the vision, the mission of the organization. The goal is to how do we work alongside of Linzay. He's the principal. He has said that he wants to increase the number of students and so and give the budget. How do we make sure? But most of the time, it's during the General Assembly that the board are aware that they couldn't achieve this and that. And the board will say, this man is a failure, we need to fire him. No, it's not a failure. It's not a failure, the board is a failure. So, it is the job of the executive leader to make sure that this understanding is there for the board. Peter Drucker said, board have one thing in common, they never function. All board never function. And Jim Carver said, board are highly intent, highly class people, but involving in low level and engaging in low level activities. So many times, organizations will have this name, but the question is, where is their impact? Have you ever seen an organization that is not performing, and you hear that somebody name is mentioned to say, we have Dr. So on our board. You say, do you mean Dr. John is part of what you guys are doing? Why? Because I know him to be a high-level individual. Can he involve in something of this nature? So, it is the job of the executive leader. Executive leader as a recruiter of new board members to fulfill critical gap. One, that is when a new board is to be set up. But once the board is in place, that becomes the job of the board. In Africa, when people leave a board, that's when you're looking for replacement. It's a bad, wrong practice. It is the job of the board member to recruit themselves, not to appoint. If I'm going to be on your board for 3 years, the first year I'm to fully engage. The second year I need to start recruiting. By the time I'm finishing, I need to produce 3 people that the board committee will select from. Otherwise, if you allow me to select, then I will bring somebody that will be representing me. And that authority, that is not to be given to. executive leader actively foster unity and trust among essential board effectiveness. And that is by providing training for them. I asked a rhetorical question the other day. How can a decision maker be effective and efficient without giving the necessary tools? Many times, do we have board retreats whereby our board is bringing capacity building? No? We just want them to approve. But if they don't know, how can they approve? So it's a big thing. So I want to say here our board is very critical. Thank you.
Thank you.